welcome to another insightful episode of the Kalati podcast, where we bring you engaging conversations with leading professionals shaping children's education and literature across Africa. I'm your host, Inequality, Communication Marketing Officer at Kalati. Today, we are honored to speak with Hilma Weber, an early childhood development specialist, children's book author, and the driving force behind the Play for All initiative in Namibia. Hilma's journey from tourism management to championing literacy and education in underprivileged communities is truly inspiring. Stay tuned for an exciting conversation as we explore her work, passion, and the transformative power of early childhood education.
First and foremost, I just want to congratulate you for all the work you're doing in Namibia, right? And your contribution to children's education, the literary industry as a whole. For those who may not know you, even though I do know you a lot, can you tell us something little about Hilma Weber? Did I get your name right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, no, thanks, Eno, for having me. No, it is a pleasure to be here with you. No, I am from Namibia. I'm Namibian, and as many children, I grew up in a small village in northern Namibia, and that's where my childhood has been. Playing in the sand, looking after the animals, helping in the house with household work. Yes, and after my formal education, I ended up in the tourism industry. So that's who I am. I'm a mother and a wife, and I love writing.
Okay. You mentioned you are a mother. Before we get into the conversation, would you say that influenced your decision to go into being an author or to go into writing?
Yes, one of the contributing factor. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned that you were first in the tourism sector. It's like you rose to senior management and you've moved now into the early childhood development. That's quite a shift, that's like a huge gap from one industry to the other. What would you say inspired you to leave behind such a successful career? I mean, from my point of view, I would say successful career because of the level you rose to. So what inspired you to leave that behind and focus on children's education, especially in informal settlements? You didn't really focus on maybe the peri-urban or urban areas, but decided to focus on informal settlements where children do not have access to or have the privileges of those in the urban sectors.
Yeah, no, definitely. It is a big shift. I agree. And if you would ask me 10 years ago, I wouldn't tell you that I was going to be doing this. Definitely not. So I always wanted to be a full-time mother.
Okay, that's quite interesting.
So or a stay-home mom rather. So when I was giving birth to my son, I decided to resign, that it was time to change because I was a human resource executive at the time, and that position was really demanding. I enjoyed it, every moment of it, but I made the decision to stay home. So that's how my new career developed. So I stayed home with my son, and when he was about 3 years, I started visiting a project that was run by an organization called Development Workshop in Namibia. And I went to visit the project in the informal settlement. So they were focusing on sanitation and all of that. And I went to visit the kindergarten there, and I interacted with children, with the teachers, and something in me just clicked because I then have a 3-year-old child. And I could see the difference of the exposure my child has and what these children had. But their story resonated also quite a lot with my own story as a kid. So that's how I really got into the early childhood development. And I felt that day something needs to be done. And that's what I did.
Right. That's quite interesting. Like every step of your way was determined by the point in which you got to. So for your work, because you had a child, so you became a mother. And then you only got to know about the informal settlements because you had to work with a development organization.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite interesting. Okay. There's also this initiative I read about, which is the Play for All, which
Yes,
sounds quite interesting. And I'm guessing that came as a result of your visit to the informal settlement. Could
correct.
you share some success stories or moments from the program or the initiative that you think have deeply impacted you or even the children you work with?
So maybe let me just put it in context, if you
Okay.
allow me. Is that
Yeah.
so? After that visit at the kindergarten, I started collecting children books, and then we went reading to children with some university students. And from that there on, the children wanted more, the teachers wanted more. So we thought of kind of find a way, how can we make this sustainable? And that's how we started the program, or initiated the program called Play for All. So we then talked to partners like UNICEF, corporate sector, and said, this is what we would like to do. And we got donors on board, and that's how that program started. So the program has different intervention areas. So one is training ECD teachers, specifically in Namibia. ECD teachers, the whole ECD sector, it's largely informal. Although it falls under the ministry, it's kind of informal. So a lot of teachers are passionate mothers and fathers or individuals who are just doing something in their community. So they see, oh, I'm living here. I see there are a lot of kids not going to kindergarten. There is no one in my area. I'm going to start one. So one of the focus area is ECD teachers training. We get in experts and they train the ECD teachers. We do parents workshop, or the program does parent workshops. We're engaging parents about the importance of early childhood and early learning. And then identifying ECD champions within those communities who then do house-to-house visit and simply championing the importance of ECD messages to parents. And of course, the other one is developing learning and teaching materials, which includes then children books. So that's the program. Yeah, and it also hands out library boxes to the kindergartens and so on. But what I would say, the highlights moments for me in
Mhm.
when I was fully working in this program, and even now, is the joy of seeing children holding books in their hands. So it's really, I think everybody who is in literacy and understands the value of owning books. So, and it is just a fulfilling moment to see children who would have not otherwise owned a book
Right.
in their early years, but
Definitely.
they books, they got a chance, they got an opportunity to do so. And that books are, they are learning that books are not only connected to a classroom, you know. So that's for me, it's one of the major impacts.
Oh, that's such a
Yeah.
great initiative because these days, I mean, currently we have a lot of edtech startups that are mostly focused on the urban and peri-urban areas because when you go to informal settlement, they do not have access to technology.
Mhm.
Technology isn't affordable. It's not, and even the technical know-how isn't there, right? So this initiative is something that is of significant value to these children who, like you mentioned, wouldn't have had the opportunity to be at par with their colleagues who have easy access to this technology and can even afford it, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think having books, it allows them to imagine beyond their circumstances. So you live in these areas, you have no access to water, access to electricity, you live in a shack sink
Exactly.
house. So you imagine, when you read, you imagine the world outside that surrounding.
Great. I think earlier on you mentioned that as a kid growing up, you didn't really have access to books, right? And when you met the children in informal settlement resonated with you. But today, I mean, today we all know Hilma Weber, and you're an advocate for children's literacy, you're an advocate for early childhood experience. How would you say your early experience growing up, how would you say it has shaped your approach to early childhood development and even your motivation to write children's books? Aside from you having a child and having to visit these areas, what would you say? How would you say it has shaped your approach to ECD and then your motivation to write children's books, and
Yeah.
particularly African children's books? Let me make that clear.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, growing up, I didn't have books, but I was fortunate to have a mother who was very engaging. So we would sit and look after the goats, and she would write on the ground, in the sand, and I would read and stuff like that. But I think now what really pulled me with that visit to say something needs to be done, and seeing that the stories of these children resonated with mine, is to change the status quo. Because I observe that inequality, we have a lot of inequality, but that inequality does not start when we are adults. That inequality starts the day the children are born. So two mothers are giving birth on the same day, but one has resources and the other one doesn't. So immediately that child, mother with the parents without resources, is disadvantaged, is it does not have the same opportunities as the others. And this also, one of really strong feeling I have in me is that we have a tendency to say that Thomas is very clever. Just because Thomas has parents who has resources, has access to books, and all to great resources as a child, we say Thomas is clever. But Matthias, who is growing up in the informal settlement, is also clever. It just didn't have the opportunity to have resources and exposure. So that's really where my motivation is, that these children are just as clever as the children living in mansions in the city center. So there is no difference. They just need the resources.
Definitely. And picking on that, I just wanted to add something, even for my own personal experience. When you come to Ghana, when you go to the northern, in fact, when you go to the northern sector of every country, it seems that is not usually developed, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I mean, while I was like in the northern part of Ghana, right, I would say I was a bit privileged because my dad was in like the southern part, and he could send me like all the books I needed. But these were books that were children's books that were written by the Enlightened, written by Westerners, right? And over there, I thought I was so clever. I had access to these books, yes. But even my colleagues, I mean, my classmates didn't have these books. I shared it with them, right? But then I moved to like the southern part where there's more access to some of these things. Like there's so much exposure. And I realized that because I'm here, I'm able to compete at the same level with my classmates here because I had the opportunity to learn or be exposed to these books while I was up there, right? So what you say about Thomas and Matthias is actually very true, and I can attest to that. And also, when we're talking about inequalities, right? I know Namibia. I don't really know Namibia that much, but the way Africa is and the inequalities surrounding it. In your view, what role does early childhood education play in bridging these social and economic gaps, particularly in undeserved communities? I know you just mentioned something little about it just now, but let's expand it a bit. Like, what would you say, what role does early childhood education play in bridging these gaps?
Right. Yeah, I think that's not a question. I think there's a lot of studies that has proven that investment in early childhood development, it is the way to go. It's the way you build society. It's the way you build human capital for the future. When you neglect it, it becomes very expensive because you are grooming poverty. Yes. So definitely that's where the foundation is laid for a great society, to set up children for success. You're giving every child the right start, first steps to be the right steps. So you are giving children opportunities. And it's also the critical age where the foundation is laid, is when the brain is really open to learning. And a lot of children who has great foundations, they tend to be successful throughout life. And so you're developing critical thinkers, you're developing innovators when you invest in early childhood development. I think what really needs to be done is that policy levels, we shift and we focus in early childhood development. It has been so neglected. And I think in my career as an author now, I'm only starting off, but what I have observed is that there's very little literature, African literature, for
Exactly.
young
Yeah.
children. And I'm talking about children from 0 to 6 years old. I'm sure you know the same. But
Yeah.
this age group before grade 1 is not catered for. And that's the critical age when the brain is at most rapid development. And we are missing that gap. We are not optimizing on it.
You just mentioned that you are an upcoming children's book author, right? Can you share with us some of the themes you tend to explore in your stories, and how do you ensure they resonate with young African readers? Because I mean, the influx, in fact, growing up, we've all been used to reading Western books, books that don't reflect our culture and our realities. Because
Yeah.
I'm reading an enlightened book, and then they're talking about snow and white eye, blue
Yeah.
eyes, and so how do you ensure that your books they resonate with this audience?
Very, very important. And also, so I am passionate about geography for kids.
Yeah.
So one of my very first book I wrote in Namibia for Namibian children is the Children Atlas, the Children Picture Atlas of Namibia. So this allows children to know, okay, I live here in this corner of this town, or I live in this village in the deep rural area, but this is my country. Yeah. So to just be proud, to instill a sense of proud of who you are, your identity, and so on. And yeah, geography for kids for me, I have just released an Africa Picture Atlas for children, and that is with the same kind of thinking that African children needs to value and know their continent. So not that we sit in Africa and we think, oh, Europe is better, America is better. So there's a lot of content going around for adults about valuing Africa, but where is for the children? So because of my career in tourism, I very much how can I influence to write children that are to write stories that are about tourism and travel. And like this way, I feel children also learn beautiful places in Africa and so on. Nature and its value, friendship and kindness, emotions, well-being, confidence and self-esteem is some of the themes. And I'm also passionate about preparatory math, books that have the concept of preparatory math for children, because this is important for children that are preschoolers, so they are prepared when they go to primary school.
Great. Thank you so much. We've been talking a lot about African children's books, books that reflect our identity, books that reflect our realities, and we're not getting lost with our heritage, right? So, why do you think we need to have diversity when it comes to educational content for books? And I'm asking about educational content for children because there's so many edtech startups that are focusing on ebooks, right? They also focus on audiobooks, focus on educational content for African children. We have the likes of Kalati, if I should say, the likes of Kunda Kids, the likes of Akili and me. And I feel more African children are learning through these videos, these animated content, right? So why would you say we need diversity when it comes to educational content for children? Why do we need that diversity?
I think that is important, and I'm glad that you are mentioning about Muna Kalati, Kunda Kids, and everyone around there. I think it's important to have diversity, and I think we have to flood the market with children content in all kinds of forms. And I don't think it's never enough. Yeah. So I think it's really important. It's important for intercultural learning, intercultural, but also the world is the global space is it's becoming one village really. So it's just important that we also put our content there, that we are not looking to get content from others to make that ours. So we can create our own content, our children, and grow up having a sense of identity, having a sense of pride of who they are. And also other children, the non-Africans, can why not learn about who we are and our culture and our identity. So it's also a way, I feel, of promoting our African heritage. Yes. And content coming in different form like audios, ebooks, print copies, I think is all relevant to reach different target markets.
Thank you so much. Lastly, I would just want to know your views on the future of African educational content for children. And when you combine that with early childhood development, just what is the future you foresee in 5 years? Where are we going?
The future is difficult to say, but I'm super, how can I say? I would say proud to see that there's a lot of young people. There's a lot of young parents coming up really with a passion and the vision to ensure that there is content developed, African contextualized content for children, and quality as well. So I foresee that in the next 5 years, we would be able to look back and say that we are in the right direction. We are working to really cover and develop content for children, especially the age before primary school, that these children get their foundation laid. And I really hope that while this work is going on, that we get our governments on board, policymakers, to make that investment into the early years.
Okay, that the future seems bright. It seems bright. You mentioned you mentioned you recently released a book for children, Atlas. Can you tell us more about it, where people can access it or buy it, and how they can even reach out to you if they're interested in distributing in their country? This is your chance to sell your book to us.
Yes. So the Children's Picture Atlas, actually, I just self-published 2 books. So one is the Children's Picture Atlas of Africa. I have a copy right here. So it is an interactive picture atlas for children from 0 age up to 12 years. And it just really takes the children through Africa. It's landscape, it is nature, it is cultural people, it is transport, how do we function, minerals. So yeah, it's a sum up of Africa for children. And the other one is the treasure hunt. This is a story about friendship set in the and it's about friends looking for a treasure, and just to realize that actually the treasure we have is this beautiful nature. It's us, it's our friendship. So these books are available on all major online stores, including Amazon, but also distributed by African Book Collective. So library, bookshops can get it from African Book Collectives. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedule, as I mentioned when we started, to have this conversation with us. It's been insightful learning about your work in early child development and your baby steps in being a children's author.
Yeah,
we
thank you
can't
very much.
wait to see.
Thank you.
More
No, maybe just one last
Yeah.
to share that in Namibia we are also working on a small publisher to start publishing children books. So we will be definitely sharing those as well.
Right. We can't wait to see your titles on our Kalati app very soon, so that people will be able to access these books as well on that platform.
Thank you for joining us today on the Kalati podcast. You've had the privilege of learning from Hilma Weber, whose dedication to children's education and her remarkable work in Namibia reminds us of the power of books and early development in changing lives. Be sure to follow us for more inspiring conversations with African children's book professionals and educators. Until next time, let's continue working together to foster a love for reading and learning across the continent. Goodbye.